June, we have you on the podcast today. I'm doing your job because you're usually the person that's doing the phenomenal job of managing the conversation, getting the best out of people. So I'm going to do my best.
I'll be marking you.
Yeah, there's no pressure, no pressure.
Note taking.
Right. So we're trying to get this on the schedule for a while. And I have a fun fact that you both share at a point, but as a tradition in the Bottleneck podcast, we like to give the guests the opportunity to own their own narrative. Oh. So you actually are the one that will introduce yourself to our audience for those that haven't.
Okay.
That's a meme right there. So it'll be great for you to give our guests an overview of who you are, what you've been getting up to.
Yeah.
And we'll dive into your bottlenecks throughout your career and your time.
Okay, sure. Well, my name's June Sarpong. I have had a 30-year now career.
Wow.
Yes, long time. First started in radio, then the majority of my career was in television, on screen, and then more behind the camera later. I've written a number of books. I also have my own publishing imprint, which is a lot of fun. Speak all over the world, advise lots of people. And how we know each other is I have a new podcast called Culture Conversations that you and your team have been helping us with, learning the landscape. And we know each other just through the industry over the years.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So when I had no idea that you two were working together until I actually watched the show, and I'm like, what a great combination. So I'm delighted to be here.
This is fantastic.
A lot of people say that me and Rory's combo doesn't make sense, and then it does make sense.
Total sense.
People that know us say that it makes sense.
Yeah. Knowing you both, this makes sense.
Do you know how it started? We were both in Greece, and you know this
on
whole
holiday together.
No, it was
WPP
a
stream
event.
The stream. Okay.
And you know when friends come together and say we should start a podcast, right? So I met Rory, and we spoke for an hour and a half, and we're like, this should have been a podcast, and then we ended up putting it all together.
And you had a business called Butterfly Effect, so I was immediately sold, okay, because the whole idea of kind of complexity theory and disproportionate, the small intervention that has the huge effect is the thing that's always the passion for me.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, and then so we nerded out, and then we're here. But it's great to be able to bring the people that get us excited, give us a lot of energy, and you are definitely one of those people. As soon as you walked into the studio, we knew the party was on.
Oh yeah.
Now, obviously, just launched your podcast.
Yes.
How's that experience been?
Yeah.
And it'll be great for us to know, what you're working on at the moment.
Yeah, of course. So just launched a new podcast series with the London Stock Exchange Group. It's called Culture Conversations, and it's interviewing some of the best entrepreneurs and founders and CEOs. On how they have built incredible culture that have helped them scale their businesses to these sort of incredible heights. So we've got some amazing people on series 1 and some fantastic people coming on season 2 as well. So it's great. For me, I was, having done television and radio for many, many years, the sort of the actual bit of interviewing and all of that obviously comes naturally, which I love. But it's been so much fun learning the distribution model, which is very different to, from, when I started, you made the content and you had your distributor. But actually having to create and control that I'm loving it. I mean, to see what the kids have been having all this fun, all this time. It's time to join them.
It's also actually really interesting, the question of the whole founder culture question. Because that's, in a sense, probably the story is always that this guy had this idea. But the ones who succeed, it's as much about the culture they create as it is about anything else.
100%, Rory. And also what's really interesting is, we've had a lovely mixed bag of companies. So companies that are founder-led still. And then real sort of traditional blue chip companies like Deloitte, where we had the global chair of Deloitte. We're, again, very different experience than, let's say, an On Running or one of these other sort of amazing challenger brands. But still, the sort of the core principles of what make good culture are the same. wherever you are. So yeah, it's been fascinating.
So the theme is culture, right? And I mentioned that you and Rory have an unusual connection. So you're from Ghana.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Apparently, Rory has a little.
Yeah, my DNA is 6% Ghanaian. Yeah.
Didn't I give you your Ghanaian name? Didn't I?
Which is, I was born on a Friday, so I have a Ghanaian name automatically.
Which is?
I think he was called John.
You'll have to tell me what the
We have to check.
I was definitely born on a Friday, so that gives you your name, I think,
doesn't it?
Yeah,
we told you it. We'll look it up during the
Don't worry,
conversation.
we'll pop it up over here, what Rory's name is.
I thought this was surprising because, a large part of my family comes from the North
your
Scotland.
hair. Now I understand the curly hair.
It may work in reverse because apparently the reason for the correlation is there were a lot of Sutherlands in Ghana, not that there were a lot of Ghanaians in Sutherland.
Well, yes,
and actually,
that's usually the case, Rory.
I'm not going to ask what they were doing there. I will leave that. We'll leave that missionary work. Let's assume. Okay, and interestingly, it's the country in the world after St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Canada, obviously Scotland, the country in the world where it's the most common surname. I think Ghana comes sixth or something like that. Yeah, and I noticed, I went and researched it. The most there's a big architecture firm I know called Sutherland and Sutherland. They're not. They don't. Yeah, in Ghana, they don't look Scottish. Put it that way. The two founders.
Wow.
So it is a surname there.
Yeah.
There was a playwright as well, F.U. Sutherland, but that's a coincidence because she married a guy called Sutherland who was American.
Okay.
But she was, I think, Ghanaian playwright, if I'm right.
Okay.
Yeah. But anyway, it's a known name there.
Wow.
You learn something new.
My goodness. Well, I'll have to go. But I'm presuming it's probably more of the coastal parts of Ghana.
Got it.
Yeah. Where you had
influx,
and also when the sort of the colonization, etc. A lot of it was from that part originally. Then so I bet you there's a big Sutherland community.
That'll be interesting. I'll go and investigate. Yeah, my daughter had a friend who gave up university and moved out there to study the music scene. Of course, which is fascinating.
Yeah, it is very.
You need to go for Destiny Samba.
Yeah, I'll take you.
Okay, I'll go.
Yeah, we'll get down. Come and see your people.
My people, exactly.
And also, you might have some family members.
Well, I'll go and look. I'll go and find out. I mean, it was
lucky
very
you're
funny.
married, because I was going to say, if you're going to marry a Ghanaian, you could be in trouble.
No, exactly. No, that'd be, I was going to say, that would be...
DNA seems similar.
Too similar. But the fascinating thing was, which did amuse me, which is when the sort of results came through for 23andMe or whatever it was, and my daughter's on the phone to her friend, you see, and she's just discovered that, her DNA is 3% West African, therefore mine, I'm assuming, is 6.
Yeah.
And she's on the phone to her friend and said, and according to my DNA, most people Scottish and but 3% North African. I said, we're not North African, we're fucking West African. I said, hold on a second. I was only even aware of this association.
You're proud.
And now I have this tribal connection with the Ashanti, or whatever it may be, which was a connection I didn't even know existed 15 minutes beforehand.
That's amazing.
We're not North, we're West.
Don't you know? African, for God's sake. Yeah.
But on the note of being African, we obviously talked off air about the fact that I was born in the Congo, and my dad was a doctor, and I didn't go that route, and I went to becoming an entrepreneur, marketing side, etc. And your reaction was like, how did that conversation go? So we all know about the cultural conversations around careers when you're African. So you obviously had a contrarian career based on what, quote unquote, our parents always want us to have, right? So can you walk us through, at what point did you decide to go this route, and what were some of the things that drove that? How did you have that conversation? How did you end up becoming the fabulous June that we know today?
Well, I was very lucky. I managed to secure a work experience placement when I was 16 at KISS FM. And that's why I'm so passionate about social mobility and social economic diversity as well. In that,
so you were living in London, were you?
Born and raised in London.
Born and raised in London.
Yeah,
16. This is fantastic.
And I was lucky. My school, I grew up in East London. My school was one of the best state schools in the area. So you had a lot, and it was at the time in sort of Walthamstow, which is where I grew up, that was becoming slowly gentrified. So you had a lot of sort of middle class do-gooders that wanted to send their kids to the sort of local state school rather than private school. And so our PTA was really strong and we had fantastic corporate links. And so as a result of that, I got this work experience placement at Kiss FM. I had no contacts in the industry, nothing. Just that work experience changed my life. And it was a really interesting time in Kiss's history because that's when it had just become a legal radio station. And so all of the big names in music at that time were all working at the station. So Pete Tong, Judge Jules, Trevor Nelson, everybody you can think of. And so imagine me as this little 16-year-old girl amongst all of that. And then you had all of the cool music scenes. So everybody from Jamiroquai, Soul to Soul, Blur, they would all be in. So imagine I'm this kid just around all of this. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is what I want to do. And then there was a presenter. And again, Rory, you'll probably remember her. Do you remember Lisa Anson?
I know
Yes, she's an amazing TV presenter. She was Ghanaian, or is Ghanaian too. And I just wanted to be her. And so to again be working somewhere that she had worked and sort of seeing her path, I thought, okay, this is really possible for me. So I got on very well there, and they would let me come during the holidays to work. And because the station was, this sort of fledgling startup, everybody had to do everything. So they put me on air. And so I started doing the sort of, celebrity showbiz reports. And then they had me doing the sort of weekly showbiz gossip. And then in the holidays, I'd go back and work. And then they offered me a show and all of that sort of.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really...
So how old are you when you had the show?
I started on air at 16, but what was funny was, imagine in the day I would be doing a thing called the record inquiry line. So this is pre-AI and pre-technology. So if you heard a song on the radio, you would call up and say, I heard this song on such and such a show. What is it called?
What is it and where do I buy it? Yeah.
And so I would be the one they would call up.
Great.
And as a result, I knew all the songs and people would hum songs to me and I'd be like, oh yeah, that's such and such. And it was all manually done.
So there used to be this thing, you'll remember this, the Telegraph Information Service.
Yes.
So before there was Google, the Telegraph had some sort of library and they realised they could make money outsourcing.
Yeah.
And if you needed to know, particularly in an office and you didn't have it, you needed to know any kind of factual figure like, the population of X or the surface area of whatever. You had to ring these people and then you paid them 15 quid or something with a credit card and they gave you the answer.
Isn't it amazing?
And you were the same.
I was the same.
So
our service was free.
What was it, Shazam?
Yes!
You were the human
Shazam.
Brilliant job, actually.
It was a lot of fun. So that and it just went from there. But as a result, I ended up not going to university because they offered me a job. But to your earlier question about African parents, I decided to take the job, much to the annoyance of my African parents who did not find it funny. And they're like, what are you doing? And luckily I stood my ground. And now they're like, oh, yes, we said follow your dreams. Well, not quite.
You didn't really. You said follow your dreams after you've been to university.
But what is the importance of having a role model that... Because there's always this notion of you can't be what you can't see, right? So you said something there, which was your idol who you wanted to emulate was in that industry.
Yeah, she was. And then I knew her. I was up close to her as well.
Yeah. And then I'm sure there was some mentorship there as well.
For sure. Right? I mean, and the thing was, sometimes you don't even need the mentor. Sometimes that person just existing makes you believe it's possible for you. And she had literally set the path that I wanted to follow. So it wasn't even like I had to create the path. She had done it. You know, she had started on Kiss FM, then she went to MTV, then she went to the BBC and the other channels. And so literally I just copied her blueprint.
So what do you think the role of being visible, especially when you're somebody that is in a space where people don't expect you to be? How important is it for you to be visible, to be able to give others like you the permission to even apply or come into the room?
And you know, to that point, Elfried, I think it's important both ends. I think it's important in terms of giving others the permission, in terms of anybody who is not part of whatever the majority is for that industry. But it's also important for the majority to see a different face and to see a different face in a capacity that they are not used to seeing. So I think it's important both ways, without question.
And culture then. So something that I've always found very fascinating is that a lot of people talk about the whole concept of culture fit. But really what I've seen that's worked really well is culture ads. Obviously wanting to make sure that we talked about the fact that culture is not really a set of beliefs, it's a set of actions. So businesses have to make sure that they get the actions right, but they add new perspectives so they can solve problems in different ways. Have you seen, in the conversation around culture, what role does that play?
I think it's everything. And I think, to your point around culture fit, you can still have the fit, but the fit is flexible enough in terms of what it allows to fit in. It's not just a rigid fit, because I think the cultures that work the best are those that are very set and very focused on what their bigger purpose is, but are also fluid enough to understand that actually sometimes you need to modify that in order to reach that bigger purpose. And I think, you know, with some of the entrepreneurs that we've had, I think one that definitely jumps out at me is a man called Rafał Brzoska. He's the founder of InPost. And he's seen as a sort of the Jeff Bezos of Poland. Incredible business, multi-billion-dollar business that he created out of his bedroom in Poland, straight after.
So these are the locker people.
Yes, that guy.
So that's because interesting. The Royal Mail is now Czech-owned, isn't it? Am I right?
Yes.
And so the InPost is now
Polish. Yes, you got it.
That, by the way, intrigues me, because I always think locker delivery is ultimately the future.
It
of
is
distribution.
the future,
and it's going to be one of those behavioural challenges where it will eventually reach a tipping point. But it'll take 10 years or something. Yeah. I didn't know. So he started the business out of his bedroom in Poland.
In Poland.
Good grief.
Yes.
That's
and
astonishing.
This company has grown into this extraordinary behemoth that is now the market leader in like 22 countries. And growing. And growing, as you say.
Is it, they do deliver to the door, do they? Or is it locker to locker only?
Locker to locker.
Locker to locker
because
only.
As you say, that's the future. Because actually a lot of people, unless it's a massive household item, you know, if you're getting a washing machine delivered, that has to be delivered to your door.
I was at AO yesterday. I know all about that. Don't worry. Absolutely.
So, you know, but actually if you're busy, most people don't have the luxury of a concierge service. So actually a locker is the best alternative. If you're a busy person, you can't guarantee you're going to be at home.
So, I mean, the maths of it is that the last mile is most... Sorry, collection and sorting of the last mile is most of the cost. The distance is irrelevant. And you only need, in a country like the UK, you only need... I mean, the example is... I think in the UK, there are about 1,000 McDonald's. There are about 8,000 petrol stations. So you only need to have kind of... London's a bit different. But for sort of universal coverage, you probably only need 16,000, 20,000 lockers. There's a Dutch business where their vision is everybody's within walking distance of a locker.
Wow.
I would argue in the country you can be within. Because the other thing is most people most days go to somewhere a bit more densely populated than where they live.
Totally.
So provided there's a locker there, you've basically covered everybody. And the last mile costs are picked up by the recipient.
Exactly.
And so it's incredibly cheap, actually.
And also the thing that he has really managed to corner and get perfectly right, is the efficiency.
Yeah.
Because the last mile is usually where you have the problem, where your delivery doesn't arrive on time, all of this stuff. But actually with this locker system, he has managed to perfect that you don't have all of sort of the teething and all the issues that you have with the traditional model.
And there's also no problem of sort of theft at the doorstep or any of those things.
Exactly.
Because you know it's been delivered, you know it's been collected.
Yes.
So
it's safe.
So there's effectively a safety thing.
You sound like him on the show.
No. Because, it's really interesting because the mathematics of it, when they developed the penny post, Sir Rowland Hill actually got Charles Babbage, i.e. the inventor of the computer and probably the best Victorian mathematician of the time, to actually work out effectively the fact that if you have enough use of a network, distance actually becomes irrelevant. Because so many parcels are travelling along trunk routes that the cost per mile per parcel is pretty much zero. It goes down and down and down. So you had this thing, which is the penny post, and they had in England, until I think about 1914, until World War One, they actually had the imperial penny post.
Wow.
So anywhere within the British Empire, apart from Australia and New Zealand, which were extra, you could send a letter for a penny. I mean, it might have taken a few weeks, but it was still only a penny.
Yeah.
Wow.
That never made money, actually, because not enough people knew people in
but Ghana.
The reason I discovered in Ghana...
Unlike the Sutherlands.
No, there probably would have been somebody writing back home. Exactly, going, send oatmeal all the time. I'm sure, yeah.
And also Scottish cakes, you know, the
oat cakes.
Oat cakes.
Yeah. The Nairn's oat cakes would have been shipped out.
So clearly the podcast, there's been a lot of lessons and learnings from all these great leaders. What has been the unifier from a culture perspective? What is it about the way they lead the teams, the way they bring people together? Because people like to overcomplicate things sometimes. They forget that a company means a collective of people, which means that the difference between one and the other is the people that they have and the systems, the cultural system they instill. So what has been the unifier between all these different...
I think it's two things, Elfried. The thing that, and actually we should, in the work we're doing together, we should do, when we come to the end of the series, do a compilation clip. Yeah. The thing that I sort of saw or that I've seen come across or that all of our guests have said, two things. One is they have to demonstrate it. So the leader has to live the culture. You can't just say it and not do it. So therefore the workforce has to believe it's real because the leader represents that. And you see it when they don't. You see when it goes wrong when the leader doesn't represent that. And then two, you also have to give your workforce, and particularly like from a line manager perspective, enough wriggle room for them to then be able to implement it that works for them.
So they've got to have a bit of autonomy.
Yes,
got it.
Exactly.
And they've got to be able to interpret.
Yes. There's got to be room for interpretation within, obviously, a certain framework, of course. Yeah. But that's what I sort of saw coming across with all our guests, that they actually believed they had to live it, but they also had to empower their workforce and their leadership teams to be able to implement it in their own way. Yeah. And I think you have to see that.
And one thing that's really interesting, something that influences the culture is what you incentivize, so what you reward, but then also what you punish.
And what you punish,
right? So not only is your culture a set of behaviors, it's also what you incentivize people to do and what people get praised for.
Yes.
What people get promoted for.
Yeah.
And also what people get fired for.
And what people get fired for.
Yeah. Yeah. Those things matter. Yeah. As a leader of an organization.
That was another thing that came up as well with the culture, was firing quickly. Because one bad apple can ruin the whole thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's so interesting because you don't want the rest of the team to be infiltrated by one person's behavior.
Can ruin the whole thing.
And people don't think that it compounds.
It does.
Yeah?
Yeah, it really does. In fact, it's funny with Martin Hoffman, who's the CEO of On Running, and what's fascinating, amazing business, because for them, imagine they went from a tiny little startup in Zurich. 3 years, not much happened with the business.
Yep.
You know, it was doing
Stay
well,
alive,
but
that's it, yeah.
and then it went vroom.
Yeah.
And then it was, you know, once that sort of
Was that a
flywheel,
COVID thing, or was it earlier than that?
No, it was earlier than that, because it was a couple of things. It was sort of leading figures in Switzerland wearing the shoes. So, you know, they had some marathon runners. One of the founders is a marathon runner. Is a triathlete. And so they had some sort of famous ones in Switzerland. So if you're into running, the people that were wearing it were sort of, you know, elite runners. But then obviously when Roger Federer came on board, it just went to a whole nother level.
Got it.
And so imagine having to staff up and to have the capacity to hold that level of growth. That was the thing as well that I saw with a lot of the leaders, is how they had to increase their own capacity and up-level their own thinking to absorb that success. Now, it's different if you're, you know, becoming the CEO of Deloitte or whatever, that's a long-established company. But if it's a startup and you've been there from the beginning, even if you're not the founder, but you've been there from the beginning, it's tough to be able to go along that journey. So, yeah.
That's astonishing. So the Federer thing was that was the breakthrough
one
moment.
of them, and then it just went from, you know, yeah,
because the product's always been great.
The product's fantastic.
We talked about the importance of fame, right? Being
the
easy to
right
find.
Kind of fame.
The right kind of fame.
There's a lot of fame out there.
But 100%. And we talked about in marketing, really what you're trying to do is build fame, be easier to find and buy, and being hard to leave, right? And if you get a really great product that's able to embody those three different things and do that the right way, that's how that luck happens. And really, you notice with a lot of businesses, especially startups, they just have to not die for the first 3 years, right?
Yes.
Just
Which
don't die.
Most do.
Yeah.
Most
just don't
do.
die.
Just don't die.
And then slowly people realize, oh, you're still around.
Yeah. Oh, this is good. This must be good. 3 years, you're still here.
In a sense, if you think about it, in evolutionary biology, it's stay alive long enough to get lucky.
Yeah.
In a sense.
Yeah.
And so there was this very interesting thing that he said it was Stephen Wolfram said that actually evolution's got quite a loose fitness function. It's not, in other words, if you can stay alive long enough to reproduce successfully, your DNA stays in the game.
Stays in the game.
And what's quite interesting is you're allowed to do almost anything that meets those two criteria. You can be a patch of moss, you can be a shark, you can be a tree. If you can find an ecological niche in which you can take root, then that's, and actually part of it possibly is I mean, if you think about it, there are a lot of companies which had this lucky break. I think Superdry, am I right in saying that was a David Beckham accidental purchase or something?
Oh, was that what happened with
I
them?
hope I'm not talking complete crap here, but someone told me that it was effectively a guy in Cheltenham, because it's not actually Japanese.
Yes,
okay,
David
right.
Okay. His wife is amazing too, actually. They're like this power couple.
And so apparently it was that he was selling clothes, you know, pretty much locally. And then for some freak reason, David Beckham was photographed wearing something by Superdry.
And it just went
whoomp.
Wow.
And so there is that argument which nobody's comfortable with, because everybody believes there must be a plan. And it doesn't sound like a plan saying, I'm going to stay around long enough until I get lucky. But actually, have you ever seen that wonderful guy, the Australian who won the gold at the speed skating in the Winter Olympics?
No.
A guy called Bradbury.
Okay.
In Australian English, it's known as doing a Bradbury.
All right.
And he in some ways lucked his way into the final. He was very good speed skater, but he was nowhere near as good as the Korean, the American, the whatever.
Wow.
And his strategy in the final was, the only way I can actually win this is by hanging back and hoping the other three
get tired.
crash.
They
actually crashed.
Yeah.
So it's hysterically funny.
I saw the
He
TikTok.
manifested a crash.
No, he manifested effectively. So he's there hovering behind, effectively, you know, at a safe distance. And then all three of them take the penultimate corner and end up smashing into the wall.
And then he went around.
He's called Steve Bradbury. I think I've got his name right. right? It's one of the funniest bits of Winter Olympic footage you'll ever see.
Yeah.
And they call it in Australia doing a Bradbury, which is you basically stay around long enough, wait for everybody else to cock up.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's been my career. Stay around long enough.
But it's in some ways, if you think about, if you look at most careers, there often is. We also love when we write history. We love to pretend it was all planned and also completely meritocratic, and that luck played no part in our success.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you actually pull it to pieces, you find that usually. There are extraordinary cases of luck, like Mick and Keith of the Rolling Stones meeting on a train, and one of them has a load of blues records, so the other one... Weirdly, they grew up, their houses weren't quite back to back, but they were kind of diagonal. I think they shared a corner, their back gardens shared a corner, but they never met, and then they meet on a train from Dartford into London. And you have these kind of...
serendipity.
Extraordinary serendipitous things. And maybe, I argue this, that you can't actually plan luck, but you can massively increase the odds of it happening.
Yes. Make sure, as you say, you're in the game.
In the game, somewhere, Well, you're around. And also, I suppose, there's a certain sort of opportunism, which is when it happens...
Be ready.
Be ready.
Well, this actually, if I may tell you this story, to how they ended up partnering with Roger Federer. So it's back to your point of being ready and knowing how to turn a situation around so that it does become lucky for you. So basically, they'd been wanting to meet him for years, and he's the biggest tennis star in the world. This is a small little company. It hadn't happened. Then Roger's wife started wearing the brand.
Whoa,
so his wife was wearing it. So then, Roger started sort of taking notice of this brand. So he was like, okay, I'll meet them. So they were at a sort of the founders, they were at this sort of very posh venue, at like an award ceremony or whatever, and they get a call that he can meet you tonight. So they turn up in their tuxedos to meet Roger Federer. And so they meet Roger Federer. And Roger Federer's, they're talking, blah, blah, blah. And then they're like, oh, this is amazing. This is amazing. Oh, my goodness. Hopefully he'll, come on board as brand ambassador. So they, afterwards have this call with his management, and the management sort of mentioned Roger's fee, and it's nowhere near their budget. And in that moment, back to your point of knowing how to be lucky. In that moment, they could have said, okay, well, that's not going to happen, or we'll wait till hopefully we've got enough money to be able to sign Roger. They knew they were never going to get that money, not with the size they were then. So instead they said, we can't afford to pay you, but why don't you pay us and invest in this business? And instead of being the face of something, be an owner. And so Roger signed a big check and became a major shareholder. And so that check, which, sort of legend has it that I think it was a $5 million check. No one really knows, but it was something in that region. Is now worth over 1.5 billion. Whatever. So, yes. So,
and the funny thing is, if you look at, and look at Michael Jordan's story and the fact that his parents told him to take the meeting with Nike, even though he wanted to go with Adidas, and they gave him the opportunity to have his own shoe, and everything changed there. And there was a funny story when
to co-own the shoe.
100%.
50-50 partnership
with the equity, etc. So we did a thing during COVID. So my brother, I talked about him before, he also was one of the founding members of Gymshark's influencer marketing team.
Wow.
And during COVID, Nike's poster boy in the NBA was a basketballer called Giannis Antetokounmpo, right? And he has three brothers that are also in the NBA. One's in college, right? So during the Nigerian and Greek, right?
Wow.
Right?
So they're super tall.
Wow. So he was the MVP. So it's Nike's poster boy, right? So Gymshark is a competitor to Nike, right? So what Derby did, he's like, oh, they're all in a house together doing TikToks. Let me send the youngest brother a box of a lot of Gymshark stuff, right?
Clever.
And let's see what happens, right?
Oh my
so you leave it a week or two on complex which is a culture magazine, one of the biggest in the US. Yeah, Complex. One for Rory.
I'm cool. I'm with the kids.
So on Complex, you've got Giannis Antetokounmpo wearing a Gymshark shirt, playing the guitar, singing Harry Styles music, and it's going viral, right?
No.
And he stops and he does this. And then he continues. We all looked at each other and said, oh my God. And that's because we looked at the proximity of influence. So instead of just going for the person directly, you get all the people that are around that they'll be like, wait, hold on a second. So if you want to get the Kardashians, if you know the circle,
so you get
target
those
the
two
circle.
sisters, the twins.
Yeah. So you get everybody around them.
Well, I joke about this, which is that I get weird access to senior marketers.
Yes.
Now, the standard advertising agency approach is you approach the senior marketer, but they're approached by everybody. Yeah. What actually happens, it happens backwards, which is their young staff want me to come in.
Yeah.
Of course.
So any way which you effectively, it's exactly like sort of military strategy, isn't it? The art of war.
Yeah.
It's in other words, you find the flanking move somewhere. Yeah.
And is that what you've always done?
No. I mean, it was totally unintentional. Again, it was totally unintentional. As I said, it was a very talented film student. I did a lot of podcasts. Someone during COVID just started TikTokizing them. Because I mean, if you think about it, no one would have said, if someone had said, we want a marketing influencer on TikTok, I know we'll choose a 60-year-old fat guy. Okay, it's going to sound absolutely ridiculous. Okay, but in a weird kind of way, of course, the ridiculous is why it works in a funny kind of way.
Well, it's not the ridiculous; it's the authenticity. Because you're so real. You know, and also you drop such.
But I suppose it's one of those things which
wisdom. Is bars. Yeah,
and I mentioned this in the last podcast.
Anything that comes out of your mouth, you're like, what he said.
we say with flat white or fuck off, which is the company I kind of inspired. I like to say. Okay, the really funny thing was that we always assumed there was this application for airports and railway stations, i.e. small footprint, very fast service, tap to pay, and then we get approached because we make a lot of noise around the launch. They get approached by people who run conferences who go, actually, this is a dream for conferences and events because you get everybody flooding in from out of a plenary session. Okay, they all want coffee simultaneously. Yes. They've all got this ludicrous expectation that they can have a customized drink. And so now what then happens is that your imagined target audience and your real target audience are never really exactly the same. I mean, you'll always find that there's something else going on, or quite often you discover. This is the great thing, I think, that a lot of people think it's all know and then do, but there's a hell of a lot of stuff you can only know by doing.
Yeah.
And so we have this daft idea in business that you have to be able to prove everything, and everything has to be data driven and based on pre-existing factual data. Which is, as I said, it's a bit like saying to the cops, you can only use information that has evidential value. Because cops know that you make use of anything. Word on the street, door-to-door inquiries. Did you notice anything unusual on the evening of? There was a man driving it was a white van, isn't it? Whatever it might be. But you pick up this stuff and then you investigate further.
When you look at the current sort of marketing with everything changing so much, we always talk about the fact that you need to do two tests, right? One, you come up with your hypothesis, you do, and then you review what you thought.
Yes.
And then you think, okay, so what has this changed in our mind? Now let's test that again. And then let's compound and go. But so many people spend so much time justifying and they think that the work is the justification. No, the work is the doing. And the learning and feedback loops is what you need to be able to do. Right. And companies that embrace that culture, right, are the ones that seems to be navigating in the space we are right now. They're saying, so AI is the thing. How is this going to influence our industry? Let's try it. Let's figure it out. And then let's iterate and iterate and iterate.
How are you both using AI in what you do?
Do you want to go or should I?
I've never even used ChatGPT.
Interesting. No, I mean, I use it very extensively I still weirdly think I don't think this is the final manifestation by a long way.
Definitely not. God, no, But as we found with our LinkedIn captions.
There are certain things. I mean, there are some specialist ones, for example, in looking for academic research, which are astonishing. And its ability, I mean, at a very simple, banal level, it's a scarily fast typist, isn't it? I mean, but I'm astonished also because some of the ones I've seen in terms of reframing things, in other words, there's an element to it which I never expected. I thought it would come up with a very, very good, what you might call default answer, the expected answer. And of course, sometimes it does. And in fact, if you're not very good at prompting, that's what it does. But its ability, when prompted well, to come up with a completely different take on a whole business, actually. What is this business really for, and what makes it different from its competitors? And some of its psychological insight is just freakily good, which in a way I don't, I hate to say it, but I don't, I used to think that it was effectively raising the floor and not necessarily raising the ceiling. And I don't think that anymore. What's your take on that?
Oh, no, I'm all in. So let me roll up my sleeves for this one.
What do you use it for?
I think that AI is going to reinvent everything. I think that everything is up for grabs now. What I've seen is it's become the bridge between the digital world and the real world. And so there's a guy that I keep talking about right now that I'm very fascinated by, a guy called Palmer Luckey. So Palmer Luckey built a business called Oculus. It was bought for
of course.
$2 billion, and then he got kicked out because I think he supported like a Trump campaign or something like that.
But Meta didn't even use it though, did
they? Well, it probably informed the new Ray-Bans and everything, so that was an evolution of it.
So they took the tech.
Yeah. But then what he said was, okay, AI is a thing, there's this new technology. His whole thing is all about finding in-the-box industries and thinking out the box, right? And there was a couple of problems that he wanted to solve, and the one that he landed on was the U.S. defense system. And he said, okay, how can AI apply to this? Wow. And now you have autonomous driving airplanes, like they're able to give them helmets where you can see through walls and be able to start to anticipate things. Now, why I think that AI is good, where I think AI will be powerful is that I think that we're only using it at the bottom surface right now. Because a lot of people still have this Google mentality of, I ask a question, I get a response.
Yeah, don't do that. Well, you do that, but I mean, that's not the...
It's a co-creation, right? Like, if you know somebody that has a particular perspective, you can rent their brain and make them part of your council. So what I do is, if I'm solving a problem, I'd say, okay...
What would Steve Jobs do for this?
What would this person do? What would this person do? And you can have a council of different contrarian perspectives, and you make a decision, which is super interesting. We use Fireflies, and Krish from Fireflies was our first guest, and we record all conversations we have, right? But the good thing about it is our team can, if I'm busy, like today we're shooting all day, they can ask my AI version, what would Alf think about this? And I've given them the permission that if you don't get a response from me in 24 hours, whatever the AI says, that's me, right? And from a copywriting perspective, creative perspective is great. But when we start to bridge industries that have not evolved in a long time with AI, that's when you're going to start to see some real magic happening. And I think that for the last 10 years, you had very brilliant people building apps. And now, last weekend, my co-founder Michael, there's tools. So we love the idea of using tech to make our experience a lot more efficient. And what we noticed is that we had to buy all these tools to make that happen.
Now,
and now you can just build it yourself.
Yes.
You can just say, okay, we have this problem, let's build a tool to make it happen, a bit of this, a bit of that. So the actual products themselves no longer have any value. The proprietary data has value, and the products that you build has value. And if you can bridge those two using AI, there's going to be a lot of companies that are going to fall. Right?
Yeah.
So many companies
have to evolve.
Yeah. There's so many apps that we're getting these crazy valuations, right? But now a bigger organization can say, well, I just want this feature. AI build it for us. That's gone now.
Lovable's building everything, isn't it? Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So you look at the companies that basically make money per desk.
Yeah.
That's a threat. That's a huge threat to them, isn't it? Because they assumed they had this guaranteed future revenue basically coming in through, desk
Monday.com, all those people. It's a very interesting time, is that actually people can just build the features. Now, a features is no longer a moat. It's not an outlier anymore.
So my weird one here is I'm kind of weirdly intrigued because I don't think anybody's done the Apple of it, which is they've done the tech, but they haven't done the interface.
Okay.
Well, there is, of course, that weird ChatGPT thing coming up designed by Johnny Ive, isn't there, which is some sort of pendant thing, we think.
Oh, so you think we will need a specific device or...
Well,
I think it's going to be in everything.
Part of this is just selfish, which is I'm 60 years old and I don't want to spend 30% of my remaining waking life with a laptop anymore. Okay. I don't care what the alternative is. It could be spectacles. One of the things that interests me is big screen. Yeah. In other words, what's collective AI like? In other words, just as we watch a film together or you have a board meeting together, how does AI intervene in collective decision making?
So like we all interact with
so
we'd
all sit there. There'd be a bit like I suppose, what is it? Blake 7. Does anybody remember this? No, nobody does. They haven't got a clue. You do. Well, there was Aurak, wasn't there? And there was Zen. They had these two. This is really tragic. I'm breaking the fourth wall here. Sorry about that. Because I've got to talk to people who can remember Blake 7. But there was Aurak, which was a thing with lights in it which spoke, which was this sort of super technology.
So
and Zen was the ship's computer, which had a big screen.
Oh, so we all want an Aurak, do we?
Well, I wonder if do we want to talk to the thing?
Isn't that what those robots are going to be?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. There's robots now.
That's another thing altogether.
The robot will do everything.
Yeah, because if you think about...
although currently they're outsourced to low-wage countries and the robots are being...
They're made in China.
Well, no, there were these robot demonstrations where it wasn't really an intelligent robot. It was being controlled remotely by someone in a low-wage country.
No.
But my question is, I don't quite get how that's different from colonialism.
It's the same.
Okay, just because it's remote.
Yeah,
okay,
it's not.
Right?
It's not different.
You could argue that at least colonists had the decency to go to the places they colonised. Which... No, I'm making the point that you did at least have to go there. No. But I mean, you can have exactly the same adverse effects without going there, is what I'm saying.
Yes.
You see what I mean?
But then that's where this whole conversation... Which is why this conversation of what Pomalaki and the guys at Arundel are building is that they can basically send soldiers on mission. They can send the AI products on missions that people wouldn't go to, which is crazy, right? Because there's certain things where actually you will not do it because you'll risk not only harming people. The good thing about this is that it's supposed to not hit any civilians. You can now be more targeted. But on the other side, you have the risk factor.
War's not... I'm sorry, that's not something I'm here to co-sign.
Yeah. So, not co-signing at all.
Yeah.
What I mean is that with the technology that they're saying is that's what they're saying. But on the flip side, if you are doing more risky missions, because that's what people always do. Oh, so what can we do when we can't do with people? You always have to look at the spectrum of it, because when we're talking about AI, we're only thinking about it from an assistant when it comes to copywriting, but every industry is going to use it.
Well, the scary thing is then it's like, well, then it means that it's limitless.
Exactly.
And at what point does destruction get beyond anything humans can control? That's the scary stuff.
Yeah. So all the rules...
At least risky missions, there's a point at which human beings are like, actually, we can't do that.
Exactly.
Now, if we've got machines that can, what does that mean for the safety of humanity?
Exactly. And I'm never one of those people. So I'm an optimist by nature, right?
So am I.
But in my brain, I always like to say, okay, how would the hero do with this? And how would the villain do with this? And you always have to look at it that way, especially in the social world, right? When you're putting content out, you always want to make sure that how would different people use this perspective, right?
Yeah.
And I look at AI and I'm like, okay, you need to make sure that it's used to empower human capability, right? Not replace it, right? And we're not inherently built to do some of the work that we've actually been made to do. And it's a good thing that there's going to be automations in those spaces.
Right.
But I think that it's still very important that in our pursuit for efficiency, innovation, et cetera, that we maintain our humanity.
Of decency.
Right. Which is why I think that it's super, super important when we're thinking about AI, is that we don't think about it as how it is today, but potentially what's going to be built for it's going to be tomorrow.
Yeah.
But as we're still here today, how do we make sure that we use it in the right way?
Yeah.
That's super important.
Yeah,
right? And how we use it in our company is we now realize that we have no borders, right? So there's a tool called Deal that allows you to hire people from anywhere. And because we have AI, you don't have to be in every meeting. It's all documented, and you can go back and say, give me a download of the meeting and everything like that. So all those gaps that are filled with being in an office, we can automate all of that.
So what does that mean for the office? Because the office was already under attack after COVID.
Right.
Yeah.
What does that mean with AI? But we still need to interact with each like this.
Yeah.
Yes, we could do it over a screen. We can do it over Zoom, but it's nothing like being here with you two.
You could have a fourth participant in the conversation which added factual corrections, inspiration, whatever. I mean, there's something about big screen AI, even potentially, IMAX AI, which kind of interests me.
Ooh,
The spectacles thing, I think Meta's, I'm not sure that Meta will succeed because they're Meta, but I think that's fundamentally right. I think that sort of augmented reality approach where we effectively, you'll know this from, of course, TV, it's what do you call it, the lower third, isn't it, in TV, the scrolling bit at the bottom of a news programme.
I don't know.
So in other words, what the spectacles would provide is, is effectively
like
a commentary, contextual commentary on what's going on.
Kind of like on Amazon Prime, when you click on it, it tells you who the actor is, what's happening in the scene, etc., etc.
Yeah.
What's it called? It's called, they've got a name for it, haven't they, Amazon? It's quite cute, actually. I suppose they bought IMDb, didn't they? So they must have all that data.
Yes, they have
that.
all the information, and what they've done, and
And then the other thing that's, of course, terrifying in terms of physical intelligent moving objects, which is, if we look at what the really successful species are, they're not humans, they're social insects. And if you think about an AI swarm of things, where one will die, any individual's happy to die to fulfill the collective mission, which is kind of how wasps and bees operate. Humans don't.
No.
Generally, if you had a mission which said 3 of you are going to die getting into the compound, and then the rest of you, generally, it happened. Obviously, kamikaze
one gorilla versus 100 humans. The same
Most
conversation.
Humans aren't happy to do that.
One gorilla versus 100 humans.
But an insect-like AI intelligence would be difficult to compete with.
Well, we couldn't. No.
Yeah, which is
Okay, can we change the subject?
Yeah, this is too impressive, isn't it? This is now too depressing.
Ask two marketing geniuses, marketing legend, and a marketing supremo. I was going to ask you, from a marketing perspective, what are your views on the Kardashians?
Do you want me to go first? Or
you go first, yeah.
I think that I would rather take a masterclass learning about marketing from Kim Kardashian than going to a Harvard University professor
because they are
about marketing
geniuses.
No, because I think people underestimate how long it is to be relevant for to be relevant about something.
As long as they have, and all of them.
Yes,
attention for over 15 years is really difficult.
Yes.
And a lot of people in this age especially. And I think a lot of people underestimate how much look at all the men that have been associated with them and how they always dissipate, right?
Yeah.
It's because it's so difficult to be able to handle that level of pressure, scrutiny, lack of privacy, and still being able to be creative, build businesses and brands off the back of it. I think that a lot of people look down on the current state of marketing and the approach, but I think they've just been pioneers, if I'm honest. I think that what they've done, and you've seen the business they've built off the back of that, from Skims to like Good America
to the Kylie makeup,
the Kylie cosmetics and everything, and the way they've got people,
and even Courtney's vitamins,
so that in all the different spaces, and I just think that they're brilliant. But Rory?
Yeah, I think the thing that really amazes me, I think you're right, is the longevity. It's not the fact that it happened.
Yeah.
Those things happen all the time. The flash in the pan.
Yeah.
Because Paris Hilton happened, didn't it?
Yeah. And she was Paris Hilton's assistant.
Yeah.
Yes,
of course.
So going back to the whole thing about staying alive enough to get lucky, she was probably waiting for her turn.
Yeah.
Right?
It's the Michael Faraday working for Humphrey Davy. Yeah, absolutely.
Waiting, learning, and then when the opportunity came in, she was like, I'm just going to go.
And she had the genius mother.
Yeah.
I mean, because I think, from a business perspective, I think Kris Jenner does not get enough credit. That woman is probably one of the most successful business executives in modern American history.
100%.
She has helped to build over at least $500 million brands.
Yeah.
I mean, Skims is $5 billion.
Yeah.
The smallest is 500 million.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Each brand is $1 billion brand.
I've got a theory that was
unbelievable.
always the case. That actually, not always the case, but actually a huge number of what we think of as business titans, there was someone there who might have just been their assistant.
Yes.
Okay, back in the 1950s, who was as decisive or even more so. But at the time, it was the guy who got all the credit and was deemed as the author of the success.
Yeah.
But there was somebody there.
Yes.
Could have been a wife, could have been an assistant, could have been, whatever, quite often, who was, actually, funnily enough, there is a case of that, which is, I think, if I'm right, Carl Benz's wife, as in the automobile, Mercedes-Benz, was the marketing genius.
Right.
If you dig this up, she did some famous drive in a car, massive sort of publicity event.
Wow.
And so, but I think that in reality that was actually much more common than was ever allowed, because at the time you wouldn't have spun the story that way.
Milton Hershey was his mother.
Oh.
And Carnegie was his mother, actually. A lot
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So there's
a whole story there. I think I probably redeemed myself, haven't I, from the okay.
Yeah.
But I think there were a lot of unsung female heroines.
For sure.
Yeah.
And it was simply the narrative made it look what this guy did.
Yeah.
But actually, if you really, Ben's is definitely a case where they did at least record the fact that she had the kind of marketing nous.
Yes.
He was the nerdy inventor, and she had the kind of publicity nous.
Happened with Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos and his wife, right? She played a massive role in that, and I think a lot of the times people, they don't understand. So a lot of the leaders I've had in my teams, from Gymshark to Butterfly Effect, have been women. Right. And I feel like, especially in the modern day business building world, and we just talked about empathy and understanding our human
skills,
difference and those soft skills. That's super, super important, because you have to get other people on board. We were just speaking to Ellie, and I think that she's one of those people that has that everyone's able to unify and get on mission, but in a way where you're not very combative with each other. There's another channel on YouTube. I forgot their name, but they usually do these like crazy formats where it's like one person versus like 20 different people, right?
And you debate them.
Yeah.
You debate one after the other.
And the best...
Isn't it called 1 to 20?
Yeah.
Like that?
And the best discourses are usually with like the women guests, because they're trying to get into an agreement. Not necessarily an agreement, but an alignment. There's listening, there's exchange. You actually want to understand what the other person has to say, so you can better understand how they think, and so you can come to a conclusion. But a lot of the time when you see two guys, it's always like, who's going to win, right? And no one actually ends up making any great points. It's just like one-upping each other, right? Yeah. And when you just like, it's actually very uncomfortable watching that conversation, and you realize that this actually happens in society, right?
Which is why we need equitable workforces.
Yeah.
You need that balance.
It's also the difference between, do you want to win an argument or do you want to solve a problem?
Exactly.
Or do you want to win?
Do you want to win?
Yeah.
Or do you want to understand? Yeah. Sometimes it's just, do you want to understand? Right?
Nassim Taleb had that great phrase, which is there are people who win arguments, and there are people who win. They're never the same people.
Never the same people. It's true,
and actually, there's a mentality which is, if you go in trying to win the argument, generally you're doing that by ignoring things, but effectively by cherry picking in some form or another,
and bullying.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the career end. So you're now in the media space. You are thriving. You're learning, etc., etc. What are some of the lessons that you've learned from being within an industry? How was it at the start? How has it evolved over time? And what are some of the key lessons that you found across that journey?
Yes, I would say the number one lesson is not defining myself by what I do. Never did, and never have. So therefore, as a result, I've never been somebody that's frightened of change. So I've always been flexible and evolved and tried different things. And I think that the beauty of not defining myself by what I do has also meant that I've remained curious, because I've always wanted to try different things as well.
It's funny you say this.
Yeah. But it all connects to the same place. It all comes from a place of connection and communication. I would say that is, if anybody was to ask me what do, I would say I'm a communicator. And everything I do feeds into that, whether it's a book, whether it's, a show, whether it's speaking, whether it's a product, whatever. But yeah, even when I was at the height of my television career, and I loved what I did. I loved the show and I loved interviewing people, etc. But still, I never defined myself by that. I never thought if I wasn't doing that I wasn't of value. Yeah. So that is what I would say.
That's
to
interesting,
anybody.
because, of course, you get into that trap, don't you? Which is, if you do define yourself by what you do, it's kind of like a sunk cost thing, which is you can't then, you become too dependent
on that thing.
Yes. And I always make that point that retired politicians always seem completely sane. You go and interview a retired politician, once they're out of it, they're completely sensible, common-sensible individuals.
How come you weren't like that when you were in?
No. You Ed Balls, you go out for a pint with him, lovely guy. When he was a politician, couldn't stand him. Okay. And you have this weird thing, which is that when you have too many people with too much at stake who can't afford to fail.
Or they think they can't afford to
Or they think they can't afford to. It actually creates a kind of sclerosis. And I think actually defining yourself by how you think rather than by what you do is probably a really helpful, really liberating thing to do.
Totally. I love, and the other thing I've found, and it'd be interesting, I think, Rory, you can really speak to this, is people who have been in organizations or companies for a long time become institutionalized. And you find that they are brilliant when they're in that company with the safety, and then when they leave, it's like they don't know what to do. And you're like,
that's interesting.
It's amazing. It's almost like there's something in the brain that feels that when that safety net is taken away, that you can't function in the same way.
I mean, the nice thing about marketing, I think, is that as a job, is that one of the agreeable things is that more or less anything you do in response to curiosity can make you better at your job. It's probably not true if you're an actuary. If you sit outside a cafe in France for half an hour, it doesn't make you a better actuary. But it can make you, if you've got the right mindset, it can make you a better marketer.
Yeah.
If you start asking that question, like, why did I buy this? Why does Pernod taste delicious in France and shit in the UK? You start, if you have the right kind of observational mindset, then anything you do can make you better. Which you're going to see I would never mind if two people in a creative department bunked off for the afternoon to go and see a film.
Yeah.
It's now obviously if you're running a department full of actuaries, that's a bit of a problem.
But going back to your question about the Kim Kardashian versus the Harvard professor, it's because she's doing things, right? And then you're getting more feedback loops. And if you are observant enough to look back and say, well, how did we end up here? What happened? Let's pinpoint the lessons from this, and you're iterating and iterating and iterating, that's when you move a lot faster. Whereas if you're too busy reading the books and not out in the field, like doing the stuff, that's the difference, right?
Yeah.
Especially in a time when the time we're living in, there is no books for the time. There's just action. And those that act the most and are around other people that are acting as well, they can feed off each other. And that's what I think is going to propel like the next inventors that are coming through. And obviously, one thing about you that differentiates you from a lot of people is your energy. And I'm really fascinated by the fact that as I started to climb in my career, I realized that there's three things that I have to think about. It's my decision making, so that's knowledge, understanding, listening, etc., etc. There is of my networking, so communication is important, reasoning, getting people on board. But the one thing that I realized that is above all, it gives me the opportunity to even do those things really well is energy. And whenever you walk in, you have a lot of energy, right? We can feel your presence coming through, right? And what role does energy play when it comes to influencing culture, making sure that people get on board? Like, what role has it played in your life?
I think it's everything. I think, well, a couple of things. I think one, I genuinely really like people. I find people fascinating. It's very rare that I'll meet someone that I don't get along with. You know, usually there'll be something that I can connect with them on. And, you know, I just find it, human beings just so interesting. And sort of two things. I always look at people from the perspective of, to somebody in the world, that person is the most important person on the planet. So whether it's their parent, their spouse, their child, their best friend, to somebody, if that person was no longer around, that would be a devastating thing for whoever that individual is. So I try to experience people from that perspective. In that, you know, even if I'm not connecting with them, there's somebody that is. So what is that exchange? So that's how I sort of view people in general. And then the other thing as well is, did you know the Indian guru Satguru?
Yeah, I've come across it.
So he's this Indian guru. And he said something that really stuck with me. He said, think of the miracle of being alive. Like, what are the chances?
What are the odds?
What are the odds that egg, that sperm at that particular time, that you survived 9 months of pregnancy in your mother's womb, that human beings, it's ridiculous. Human beings kept you alive for the early part of your life where you couldn't do it yourself. I mean, like, when you think about it, it's mind-blowing. We are a miracle. We are wow. And I think when you look at life that way, you can't help but experience people that way. So I think for energy, it's that when you sort of truly value other people, I think your energy sort of reflects that. So
and I think people gravitate to that. Right? Especially
better than the alternative.
The Gen Z call it the aura. Right?
Oh, they do? Oh, look at this.
They call it when people have aura, right?
I'm learning. All right. Come on, kids.
And you see that a lot of, they talk about it with like athletes, they talk about it with leaders in businesses, et cetera, and it seems that people like to follow people that they gravitate to. And for the longest of time, when we talked about business leadership, it was the same archetype. But now I think that
tough,
I think it's time for the EQ
Steve
leader.
Jobs.
hey, I always find that it's really interesting when it comes to, and a lot of it is like American culture versus other spaces.
Actually, very good point.
I talk about the idea that you like the idea of American pace, but European taste and African heart. I like the intersection of those three things. I love
that.
Right?
This is
three
good.
again?
It's American pace,
European taste,
and African heart.
Oh, that's
right?
good.
I think that if you can get those three in there.
Where's China in this? Efficiency.
The efficiency and productivity. Productivity. Asian productivity, right?
Asian productivity.
Right. As you start to go to the different continents, it's a different mix that comes in.
It is. I mean, you get all of that. You're unstoppable. Okay, can I have another question for you both?
Yeah.
Because this is fascinating. I'm learning so much from you.
You're trying to take my job now.
Sorry. Can't help it. I'm so sorry.
It's great. I love it.
Sorry.
Let's do it.
I'm going to ask you both your thoughts on China and Africa.
Okay. Do you want to go first or should I?
The really interesting thing is the potential for economic growth in Africa is obviously huge.
Huge.
Is absolutely immense.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some, there are actually some literally low-hanging fruit in terms of agriculture.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Which is immense.
Yeah.
And, one of the interesting questions I ask is, we've automatically assumed that urbanization and that, agglomeration of people into megacities is an inevitable part of the future.
It shouldn't be.
And my argument is, actually, someone needs to question this.
I agree.
I was talking about the joke about London's a bit like Tesco Extra. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff, but there's a hell of a lot of it you don't need.
Sorry,
and it's really difficult to get around. Okay. And that actually, a nice town of 40,000 people, is kind of like your M&S Simply Foods.
Yeah.
Right. It's got pretty much and there's a bit of me which, there are certain
still
assumptions.
Have
you still have that community thing.
Yeah.
And there's a bit of me which, there in a way, a lot of what happens in the world, and this is true of Marxism in a way, we always assume that people said, look, this Marxism would be a good idea, so everybody tried it. The real belief wasn't that it was a good idea. They thought it was inevitable, because that's what Marx effectively said. There are, these developmental paths of history, and it will end up with the ownership of the... Now, that didn't happen. But a hell of a lot of people behaved not because they thought adopted it, not because they thought it was a good idea. They thought it was inevitable. And there are certain aspects of life which, for example, the endless quest for efficiency, and that's where I take issue with the United States in a way. I mean, the pace I love, as you said, a little bit of the European. So is what we need a universal basic income? In other words, redistribution of wealth. Well, yes, possibly. We're in danger of straying into a world where it is literally a very small, very wealthy cast of fairly arbitrary people who effectively control all the capital, and everybody else is effectively in a state of indentured servitude. Okay. But equally, there's sort of redistribution of leisure as well, which I'd like to see. The interesting question is, as a wider society, if you had more people who are working a 3-day week. Now,
what does that mean for quality of life?
What would it mean for quality of life? Also, what would it mean for creativity? If if it produces the Beatles, okay, there are going to be a load of people who bum around. They're going to be well, actually, there's nothing wrong with that either. And John Lennon always said, time spent doing nothing is very rarely wasted.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't, I'm not saying the gains for that leisure would be, widely dispersed. But in terms of sort of inventiveness, is it natural that people only have one job at any one time, or is actually some form of multiple employment?
Yeah.
And, where people both have a side gig and a job?
Actually,
I think that's happening.
That's what the young people are doing.
That's happening right now.
It's happening anyway. But companies should embrace it. Is
Yeah,
your point,
this is
isn't it?
Put in moonlighting
I've gone
instead.
law effectively. I'm 2 days a week with Ogilvy,
Yeah.
and 3 days a week I do my own thing. And at some level, to be honest,
You're better at your.
well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that Ogilvy isn't better off with me doing other shit
Of course they are.
than they would be if I were on the
Yes.
corporate dime 5 days a week.
Yeah.
100%. I bet they could charge more.
Well, the
If
other
they've
weird
got
thing
you
is,
on it, of course. The
well, there's
brand's
this weird
gonna pay
idea, I
more.
suppose, that our productivity is proportionate to time spent, which is weirdly Marxist, of course. It's the Labour theory of value. Okay, that you pay people for the hours of
Then
work.
yeah.
And actually, that's why your salary is called compensation, because in labour economics, it's compensation for loss of leisure.
I
Yeah.
see.
That's why they call it compensation.
To be fair,
weirdly.
whenever I used to do any
Wow.
consultancy stuff, I used to say, I'm not charging you for me to be here. I'm charging you for me to be away from my family and
Yes.
my friend.
I see what you mean.
What I want to do, or for my business, right?
Yeah.
And people don't think about it that way. They only think about, okay, you are paying the person to do the thing,
To be
not what they're going away from or what they would have done.
the opportunity cost or the- yeah.
100%.
But there's also the thing, which is that it might, well, first of all, of course, being plural gives you a degree of resilience and robustness. You're no longer dependent on one employer or indeed on one business sector. That actually a sort of return to diversification powered by AI,
We do that as an organization. We work with the senior minds on a fractional basis because we need that input every so often, right? So 1-2 times a day, a week. And that's when they make their biggest decisions. And then the people that actually execute on that on a day-to-day basis, you don't need that brain power, right? You don't need that. You need more people that are actually doing it.
Incidentally, there was no hype cycle because nobody was investing billions in this stuff and nobody stood to make billions of it out of it. But the widespread adoption and what you might call there was a kind of, I suppose there was the widespread adoption and sudden non-shittiness of video conferencing is, I think, a much more important business development than it's been given credit for. Because I kept saying to people, I don't think they got it really, because people are still very much rooted in this, permanent employment mindset. But I said, look, shouldn't Ogilvy employ Rick Rubin for 1 hour a month? I'm not going to ask Rick Rubin to come into the office 5 days a week. That'd be absolutely ridiculous. Okay, but shouldn't we have a kind of Rolodex where we have a corporate hinterland of people where you go? By the way, there are people, and there are thousands of them, who are literally worth £10,000 for 10 minutes, but simply because what they do is they put you in touch with somebody else.
Yeah.
Now, it's not easy to monetize because it seems a bit, we don't like monetizing.
We don't like that.
In the arms industry, it happens all the time.
Yes,
they're dodgier industries where people go, I will get you to meet this person.
You have to pay.
And you have to pay. Okay. You get that in corrupt societies, which is payment for access all the time. And, they're probably diary secretaries in certain countries who make a fortune for that basis. But it always occurred to me, and it always made me anxious in a way, that the most valuable things I've probably done economically in my whole working life, I never got paid for at all. One of them was basically persuading, I think, the government's behavioural insights team not to allow the government just to ban vaping as a knee-jerk reaction. Because I said, look, as a harm reduction approach, this could be the biggest thing to happen in smoking cessation, as indeed it was to a large extent. It was a bit of a risk because we still fully don't know the long-term effects of it.
No, we don't.
But at the same time, it's better than the alternative. It's a bit like the COVID vaccines. I'd probably argue that, yes, there will be people who get side effects, but net, this is at least better than an alternative.
And better for the wider society.
I don't know
if that's the case with vaping, though. Isn't the data showing...
It's very difficult to quit smoking. And the magical thing with vaping is partly because of the flavours, which is you reach a state where the idea of smoking a cigarette seems disgusting to you. Now, even people who quit for 10 years,
going straight in, though, isn't that?
It was anyway. I mean,
paper didn't make a difference.
I mean, it's inert. I mean, the main problem with smoking wasn't the nicotine. That's the irony of it. It was the carcinogenic tars that were a byproduct of the combustion. So nicotine's quite unusual as a drug in the sense that the delivery device is what's serious, not the drug. So if you imagine that you drank coffee, but that you had to drink coffee in a kind of radioactive sludge, that coffee would be carcinogenic not because of the caffeine, but because of the associated thing. Yeah. So the idea about vaping was same nicotine, same delivery mechanism, different chemical constituents.
Okay.
I'm still not sold.
No. But my only point was that the knee-jerk reaction would be to ban it without even finding out what would happen.
Yes.
But that's what happened.
Finding out what happened, and actually, the 3 countries which were most liberal with their vaping legislation are also the ones that saw the fastest decline in smoking.
Okay. Which were they?
UK, I think it might have been Sweden. And there's one other one, but there are 3 countries in Europe which basically went, we'll just see what happens. Okay. And they saw a pretty dramatic decline in the percentage of people smoking. It might be the Netherlands. I'll dig out the data. But some of the important stuff you do is neither proportionate to the time you spend doing it. I mean, there's an amusing thing where somebody came with a new business idea and they said, we think our target audience is this. And I said, you might be right, but you might be wrong. Let me put you in touch with somebody. I put them in touch with our media people. The media people said, no. We've been looking to do this for years. You see, 10 years later, the company is now worth 100 and something million.
Wow.
And they go, that meeting you arranged was why we're worth 100 million. Now, for that meeting, I got paid precisely 0. I was doing it as a favour. Yeah. Now, one of the things we've got to get out of our heads is the idea that the value of what you do, the time you spend doing it, and what you get paid for it are necessarily well correlated.
Yes.
They were in manufacturing industry. You know, if you're in a factory, those three things were fairly well correlated. I don't think it works like that at all.
No, at all. Not in what we do anyway. No.
If I look back, and actually you can only see this in retrospect, that probably 10 things you did in your life are more important than everything else put together. You know, there's a great book by a guy called Brian Klaas, I think it is, called Fluke, which is all about this, that actually we like to think of life as if it's proportionate, but actually it's very fat-tailed, you know, sort of, you know, 10 or 5 or 10 outlier events determine a hell of a lot of everything else. There's a wonderful thing which is the whole of the First World War started because the Archduke, the guy who was trying to shoot the Archduke, basically fucked up in his gun jammed.
Wasn't that Franz Ferdinand?
Franz Ferdinand, yeah. And Gabriel Princip was, I think, he was trying to shoot him. The gun jammed, and oh fucking hell, I've given up. So he goes to a cafe and goes, oh, well, one assassination attempt failed. Because of the failed assassination attempt, the Archduke's car was rerouted to the hospital to go and visit the people who'd been injured in the assassination attempt. And it turned into the street where he was sitting outside the cafe. It was a one-way street, and the car got stuck, and it couldn't get into reverse.
And he shot him.
And so he shot him there. So the whole thing was not a planned assassination attempt. It was a total concatenation of random events, which then leads to World War I.
Oh, my goodness.
And Klaas has loads and loads of these examples of how, you know, I mean, I've got a vague idea. Churchill nearly died in a car accident in 1935.
How lucky can you be?
No. It was just total random bollocks, basically.
Our reactions.
We're in huge denial about this because we want to pretend that everything's proportionate.
Yeah.
And actually, you know, one of the arguments might be, you know, if we actually had more leisure. I mean, there's a wonderful thing that happened, which I can't remember the name of it. There's a left-wing journalist who wants to bring back an old Thatcherite thing, which was called the Enterprise Allowance Scheme. Do you remember
that again?
Well, what it was if you started a business, you basically got paid more dole money. Okay, right? And so if you started any kind of business, they effectively increased your... And that was exactly the idea. We'll get people to start a window cleaning business. What actually happened was that everybody who had a band said that, you know, they were just unemployed, they were in a band. They said, if we call the band a business, we'll get more dole money.
Yeah. Wow, the weird innovation.
The weird thing that happened.
You always have to think about
this is the brilliant thing, because the government couldn't say, no, band doesn't count, you see, because the definition was any business. But then what happened is, because they'd started a business, they thought about the band completely differently. And they started like investing in buying a transit van or whatever. And so this guy's argument is that half of the great bands of the 80s, of that Thatcher era, got started because of the Enterprise Allowance Scheme.
I bet UB40 was started.
I wouldn't be surprised. I bet. And so the argument is that if you, and I've often wondered this, if you just gave everybody at age 20, you just give them a business. You know, in other words, it's an off-the-shelf business. You know, okay, anything you earn goes into this, you don't get taxed on it until you actually pay it to yourself. You can reinvest it. The extent to which that might change behaviour, so that everybody effectively has a business off the shelf to get started, and some basic accounting software, and then the mindset then changes the behaviour completely.
And then you change the whole story we tell ourselves about entrepreneurship in this country. And you asked the question about China and Africa, and I believe that is the future. Right, it's in the maths. I think there was a stat that said 40% of under 30-year-olds will be in Africa.
Well, actually, the African demographic figures are much better, and the Indian ones are much better than the Chinese. Because the Chinese have a huge aging population.
Exactly. But I think
Africa is one in three people on the planet will be African by 2050.
2050, is it?
And to add to that, that's why I think that there's such a race for AI and robots, because who's going to look after the aging population? Right. So if they're not going to encourage an increase in birth rate, they're going to have robots doing the work, right? So to be able to maintain power, because that's what a lot of governments want to do, they want the AI to get to where it needs to be so that people can actually do the work. But I think that from a human power standpoint, these countries continents, Africa, and then country India are going to do really well in the future. That's where the youth are. And any organization that's serious about being global, they should really be thinking about
in that way.
The African countries. Just have like Kenya is doing really well. You've got Nigeria, you've got Ghana. Hopefully the Congolese will be flying our flag. We always have South Africa. We're doing okay.
You're coming.
We're doing okay.
Got a few things to sort out. You're coming.
The interesting question is, can we do it? My great question is philosophically, the assumption is that it's like mega cities, huge urbanization.
We don't want that. It's got to be something else.
Do we want that?
No.
Can we find some way?
Also, the planet can't sustain that.
No.
Yeah, it can't.
There is an argument that the big cities are very environmentally efficient because of density of population, all that sort of stuff. I buy all that. But there has to be an alternative future, I would have thought.
Yeah.
What I always love about those cities is it's the fact that the problem you get in a megacity is that everything really good is either too expensive or too crowded.
Yes. Yeah.
And what you find if you move somewhere smaller is you can actually find somewhere pretty good that isn't insanely crowded, that doesn't rip you off.
And you know your neighbours, and you know the people around you.
And there's a bit of me which goes, I don't know to what extent we really scale successfully that way. How much of it is how much of it is made unnecessary by new technology. In other words, do you need people to co-locate to work effectively together? Well, yes and no. No one's asked the question, well, what's the equivalent on Zoom of an evening in the pub? Can we replicate that? Yeah,
we tried. During COVID, it wasn't the same.
I didn't
Remember, you
mind
had
it,
those
actually.
drink parties
We had those communal drink parties.
But you still wanted people in your own home, though.
It was quite interesting in the sense that we ought to actually remember this. There was a massive drop in carbon emissions, and everybody sort of survived.
Yeah, do you remember?
There's an awful. The only argument I would make is an awful lot of activity is often performative. So we're travelling somewhere to show commitment, not because the journey is totally necessary.
Yeah.
There's an awful lot of activity, I think, which is done for symbolic reasons.
Yes.
And there's a great guy called Michael Liebrich who runs this podcast, Cleaning Up, and he always wanted to create a metric for carbon emissions, which he called fun per ton. In other words, if we're going to actually produce carbon, does it generate happiness?
Yeah.
Because I always remember the leader of the Green Party got into a load of shit because once a year she flew to New York. Okay, well, her son lived in New York. I'm kind of like, come on, right? Okay, I like calling out a bit of hypocrisy, but once a year you want to go and see your son.
It has to be worth it.
But I don't really expect her to sail across like Greta. Take off 3 weeks on a boat or something, right? And so the fun per ton measure always struck me as we need some new metrics here, don't we? Because growth has become pathological as a metric. Efficiency and cost reduction have become pathological. And fundamentally, if we can engineer, maybe, as you said, if it's African heart, fine. Okay. If you can engineer something which is, the GDP is 10% less, but it's really livable.
And sustainable.
And
I think to your point, actually, and it's actually what you were saying as well earlier, Alfred, I think what's really exciting is with Africa, we do get to design something new. There's the last place on the planet where actually you can.
Interesting.
It's underdeveloped enough that you can. And, if you look at the way Africa was able to leapfrog certain technologies, like with mobile payments and with mobile phones as well.
You got M-Pesa, which is universal.
Yeah, totally. They've been doing that for decades. So I just wonder.
You got Starlink.
Yes, you do.
You potentially got pilotless drones. Okay. So arguably geographical concentration.
Yeah.
So, the whole geographical concentration thing.
Doesn't have to
Don't get me wrong. Just a bit of
Yep.
advice to anybody who's listening to me. What I'm not saying is move to the Outer Hebrides, okay? I'm not saying overcompensate and go somewhere tiny. I'm just saying that the future has to
have to be a metropolis.
It has to be Manchester as well as London, if you like.
Yeah.
And you were saying?
No, I'm saying, so for me, I think it's very exciting that actually this is probably the only place on the planet where you can try something completely different.
So we talked about culture, and as a parting message, June, it'll be great for all you've learned, all your wisdom, all your energy. What's your parting message to anybody that's listening about culture?
My parting message to anybody that's listening in relation to culture is ultimately it's about how you make people feel. That's it. You know, do people...
Because you had a BBC brief, didn't you, for a time?
Yes,
which was
I did, yes.
You were
head of culture. Head of creative diversity. Yes, so everything you saw on screen and all of anything you heard, basically our output.
Got it.
Yeah. So I didn't do any of the workforce, but the creative stuff. And it was great. You know, we made a very big investment in inclusive content, and some of that stuff is actually on air now. You know, the great thing with these jobs is you do the work, and you know it takes at least 3 years for a show that's commissioned to then end up on air. So you might not actually be there to see it, but yeah, it's wonderful now to sort of see those shows on air and all of this great talent that's coming through. So yeah, but yeah, I would say it's about how you make people feel, whether that is individually or as a corporation.
This is the interesting thing. I always said that, you know, the Apple insight, to get back to Steve Jobs at the very beginning, is everybody else was focused on what the technology could do. And he was the first person to say, no, it's not about that. It's how it feels while you're doing it. That's the decisive
and what
factor.
it says about you.
What you're doing.
And how it makes you feel about you. Yeah.
June, you're incredible.
Oh, likewise. Oh, this is so much fun, and congratulations. Honestly, it's a fantastic show. I actually am a fan, so I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming down.
Joy, thank you very much indeed.